Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and a continuing series on the Steam Deck that I'm calling Steam Deck Saturdays. And one of the most requested videos from previous ones was people wanted to see PlayStation 2 emulation on the Steam Deck. And I always use this little No Man's Sky intro just because I think it's quite attractive looking on screen. But the PlayStation 2 emulator PCSX2 on the Steam Deck is superb, both in handheld mode as well as docked. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, how to get this thing set up, because you want to be playing stuff like Resident Evil 4 on your Steam Deck. Although honestly, you could play the GameCube version, probably the better of the two, but I do love this game as an example as well. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But the first thing we're going to need for this emulator are BIOS files. They do not come included, and I'm showing you what you need on screen here. Now, not all of these may be essential, but as opposed to telling you each individual file, if you get the full archive of PlayStation 2 BIOS files for PCSX2, I know you will have everything. So you'll see here the different BIOS files that are going to be using those bins, but we're going to copy the entire contents over to whatever USB drive we're using for this. You can network in as well, but I do USB for these tutorials. And now that we have all the BIOS files we need to run PCSX2, we're just going to put one game onto the card so I can show you one example of how to get your games on, because obviously they are going to be important as well. I copy them over as folders. You can just do standard files because we're going to be dropping them all in the same folder when we get over to the Steam Deck. Just be aware that these are large games, so they do take a minute to copy over, so try not to load too many onto the card at once. That just kind of kills the throughput. And just remember, like I've said before, you need to have that USB drive formatted as exFAT. Now, if you're just new to these tutorials and you haven't seen them yet, you're going to need some sort of external USB device to put the files on, and you're going to need some sort of dock to get that USB into your Steam Deck. Now I'm showing you the one I use here. I'll leave a link down below. I don't make any money if you purchase it. It's just for your convenience, but I do recommend it. Now moving over to the Steam Deck desktop mode, that's where we do everything, you're going to see that we have all of those BIOS files that we copied over to that USB drive, and all we can do is select them all at once and go ahead and copy them, and we'll paste them in the proper resource. You'll see here I just copy them all at once with that copy command, and these do not go into the PS2 folder. I've had a few people ask me that. We're going to go to Emulation on our Emu Deck setup. We're going to go to BIOS and we're going to copy them into the root directory of the BIOS. That is enough. I've already done this in a previous step, but if I hit paste, you're going to see it warns me about that, but just go ahead and paste them in there and you will be fine. And if you're curious if you've done it correctly, EmuDeck does come with a really handy tool for some BIOS files. If you load up EmuDeck again and you go down to tools and stuff, you're going to see a check BIOS button. If you go ahead and click on that, it's going to pull up a window and it's going to say PlayStation 2 BIOS detected. This is not a perfect system. It'll just tell if you have one, not all of them, but you can use this tool as a resource to make sure the BIOS files you want to put onto your Steam Deck for EmuDeck have been found. You'll just see I haven't done a few of them because I haven't really used those emulators as of yet, but it is a great tool. Keep in mind that it does exist there. But now that we've copied those files over for the BIOS, we can start adding games as well. So if we go to the EmuDeck installation, wherever you put it, we go under Emulation and then ROMs. We are going to scroll down until we get to the PS2 folder. That's where PCSX2 is going to be designated to try to find games from. So you will see right here there's a PS2 folder, and there are going to be some games in there that I've already added over. Some are bin queues. That's because they run on a different CD format than some of the DVDs, but this will accept bin queue, it'll accept ISO, and I believe it's CHD as well, but I never usually use CHD. Personally, that's just me. All you do is copy the file of the game you want over to the PlayStation 2 folder, and it's going to take a couple minutes because it is a big file, but from there you have your games and your BIOS files on. And like usual, we want to make sure those games show up in the actual library themselves on the more handheld OS look of SteamOS. So we'll go ahead and go to the Steam ROM map manager, and it opens wherever it feels like to me when I'm capturing video. Right now it's in the top left hand corner, sometimes it's in the middle, sometimes it's at the bottom right. I don't get it. But you go ahead and hit preview and you generate an app list, and you go ahead and scroll down, and everything you added, if it is correct, will show up here. Now, fair warning, some rarer games or some Japanese games don't show up. I added one, Lupin the Third game, and it is not giving me artwork here, but when I go over to the kind of handheld SteamOS look, it does show up. But if you go ahead to the bottom left-hand corner of any game and you click that photo icon, you can add your own photos. You'll have to add them to the card somewhere for you to access them, but you can set your own custom images. So if something's just not pulling down that resource, it is a way to make sure your library stays nice and clean, because if there's one thing missing, it would drive me nuts. Click Save App List, and then it's going to ingest all that information, and it's going to pop it over to more of that handheld OS look. So we can go ahead and close out of EmuDeck completely, and we will return to gaming mode to get back to that collection menu. And you will see here, if we go to Collections and PlayStation 2, all of the games we just added are there, and this does pull from more than one resource, because now Lupin the Third, it does have that cover case art, so we're good. But I will say PCSX2 is an outstanding emulator. Even if I own a PlayStation 2 with a couple hundred games at this point in time, I do use this on my desktop because it's spectacular. Now, as far as memory cards are concerned, I know a lot of people ask about them. This will create a memory card per game if you want it to. If it says that you can initialize or format a memory card, you see in the top left hand corner, it was saved to storage. It'll set that virtual memory card up for you within the game, so you don't have to worry about making your own memory card file unless you really want to. But I will say the performance of this emulator on Steam Deck is outstanding. In my testing, I have not gotten it to hitch. It hasn't had any major slowdown issues. This just feels like a PlayStation 2, but a better PlayStation 2 because we have more options. But to get to the menu, it's going to be the following key command. You're going to hit Start plus L3. That will bring up the menu for PCSX2. You can launch it as a standalone and articulate settings that way as well. I think this is more the way people are going to want to go. But you will see here we have all these different options we can articulate, and one that I like to change right off the top, if we go down to renderer here and scroll down, most things are perfectly fine, but I do like to change the internal resolution from 2x native 720p to 3x native 1080p, especially when I'm capturing. This is just upping the internal rendering resolution to 1080p or full HD signal, and even with that, this is running perfectly. And you can go further than that if you really want to dock it and get on a 4K TV. You can really push this, and it's a ton of fun. But Burnout Revenge is a fast game, and you would notice there was slowdown, and this is working exactly how I would expect. You can switch to software renderer, it's an option. Don't do it, leave it on hardware on that Vulkan API, which it does default to, but this is how you want to play the game here. Hardware renderer just looks absolutely spectacular. It is so damn good. Now, if you watch the PlayStation 1 DuckStation tutorial, you know that there's a Force widescreen hack in there. In PCSX2, it is a widescreen patch, so if you enable this, all it's going to do is stretch the entire image, including the polygons. This does not look right, but certain games, a ton of them, have widescreen game patches. If you go to the PCSX2 website, you can search the patch you want. There's 763 pages. You can of course use Google search as well, but just remember, unlike DuckStation for the PlayStation 2, they are widescreen patches. It's not that the internal renderer can just force it to show more compared to DuckStation, so do keep that in mind, although I kind of prefer most of my PlayStation 2 games in 4x3, but that's how I grew up playing them. But honestly, when you get right to it, this plays incredible on the deck. Of all the games I've tested, I have not encountered a single issue whatsoever, and at that 1080p internal rendering resolution, it is spectacular. I don't even really hear the fan spin up much whatsoever when the deck is emulating PlayStation 2, so it isn't really stressing it too much, at least from a temperature perspective. And don't forget, if you never played Resident Evil 4, you have to save the wolf. He's a good boy. Do it. If you don't, I'm probably going to judge you for it. But this is just a ton of fun, and there's so many amazing games to play on PlayStation 2, especially if you haven't gotten to them yet. Something like We Are Katamari. I used this just to test how the analog sticks felt, because I played a ton of Katamari, and it is such an analog heavy game. If it doesn't feel right, you're going to notice completely. And I would say that the Steam Deck's analog sticks are a really good amalgamation of a PlayStation 2. And if you have this docked with like a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 controller connected via Bluetooth, it feels one-to-one accurate as to what you would think you would be playing. I absolutely love it. Now remember, you can configure the controls any way you want them to. We have the ability to both view the layout and edit the layout as well. Now 99 out of 100 times the layout is exactly what I would want, but one thing I do recommend, because we already showed a little bit of a different region game here, is you can switch the cross button and the circle button if you so want to in individual games. Because if we move over to something like Lupin the Third, all Japanese games for the most part use the circle as the confirmation button and the X as the cancel button, so if you want to switch that around you can. But the sound on PCSX2 on the Steam Deck is incredible, so go ahead and listen for like 35 seconds and I will be right back. It just sounds exactly like it should, and you will notice that is a Japanese game, and by default, if you copy all of the BIOS files that I showed you and leave the BIOS selection as automatic, PCSX2 will choose the BIOS that you gave it. You can, if you want to do it, change these around, but I suggest leaving it on automatic because that gets everything going for you. That way you can play North American games, PAL games, and Japanese games. And save state on shutdown, I kind of prefer this in case I forget to save or just want to walk away because it's handheld, so I do recommend toggling that as well. But what PCSX2 does to PlayStation 2 games is outstanding, and it runs absolutely spectacularly on the Steam Deck. Something like Ico here, an amazing game. If you've never played it, you owe it to me to check it out. It looks so good on the Steam Deck, both in capture mode like I'm showing you right now, as well as on the Steam Deck screen. It's just an incredible game, and it's made that much better on PCSX2, and there's so many other settings you can go in and articulate. This guide is to get you running, get you playing, and get you basically on the way. But if you want to play around with other deeper settings, you can go in the menus and check them out, and you can even Google what they do. But I just can't get over how well this runs on the Steam Deck. I know PCSX2 isn't the heaviest lift emulator. Emulating PlayStation 2 isn't the hardest thing in the world. Give it a mid-tier PC and it works. But I'm just so impressed by how good this emulator does with things. Silent Hill 2 here with this fog, with that screen grain effect, just looks so good. It looks better than a PlayStation 2, but if you want to make it look exactly like a PlayStation 2, you can articulate those settings to do whatever you want with the system. And that's why these emulators are so good. It allows you to do different things. Just remember that BIOS check is your friend. If you get a green, it's good. If you get a red, it's not. Now this does not check for every single BIOS that you can add for every different emulator, but it does have it for PlayStation 2, and that's what we're talking about today. So just remember, if you want to check before you go back into a different mode or think you're ready to go ahead and use that check BIOS and you will be 100%. And like I said, you can just launch PCSX2 as a standalone as well. You can totally do that if you want. It's a different menu system, but just be aware that there's more than one way to do the same thing on Steam Deck, and that's what's so great about it. It gives you the versatility to play these classic retro games in whatever manner you want, and that's all we ever ask for, is variety and opportunity. But if you follow the steps of this tutorial, you will have PlayStation 2 running on your Steam Deck, and I always use the No Man's Sky Starfield at the end just because I love looking at it. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what emulation setup video you want to see next. I love teaching you guys how to do this because I know it means you'll enjoy more retro games. I'll have videos throughout the week as well, but I'll be back next week with more Steam Deck fun. Short of that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.